Mesopotamia, or why humanity's first great experiment fell apart.
Hey guys! Welcome back, or maybe welcome for the first time, to tonight's historical ramble. This is your invitation to dim the lights, flop into whatever vaguely comfortable surface you're currently occupying, and let's collectively drift back a few thousand years. Ideally, you'll be asleep before we get to the bit where everyone starves and the rivers flood too much, but hey, that's on you. So, Mesopotamia, the land between the rivers, which sounds lovely, almost like a vacation ad. Except the rivers in question, the Tigris and Euphrates, were basically the high-maintenance, mood-swinging partners of the ancient world. Sometimes they watered your crops and gave you grain. Sometimes they drowned half your city because they were feeling extra that year. And yet, against all odds, people settled there. Because apparently the idea of having bread was just too tempting, even if it came with a side of unpredictable watery doom. Now, Mesopotamia is often given the shiny title of the Cradle of Civilization, which sounds noble, but let's be real. It was more like the cradle where humanity first realized how terrible group projects can be. Imagine it. You're just a chill farmer trying to grow some barley, when suddenly some guy with a stick shows up and says, "Actually, this belongs to the city god now, and also we're building a ziggurat, so cough up your grain." Congratulations. You've just invented taxes. The Sumerians were the overachievers who kicked this all off. Around 4000 BCE, they started building actual cities like Uruk. Uruk is famous partly because it's one of the earliest real cities, and partly because Gilgamesh lived there. Or at least some heavily mythologized king who probably yelled at people a lot and wrestled imaginary forest monsters. The Epic of Gilgamesh is usually hailed as the world's first great work of literature, though reading it is mostly an exercise in realizing how little humans have changed. Kings still go on ego trips, best friends still die tragically, and immortality is still annoyingly out of reach. But let's stay grounded. What made summer work wasn't just mythology, it was irrigation. Digging canals, redirecting water, managing floods. Basically, the city-states of Mesopotamia were a giant civil engineering project, except with slave labor, angry priests, and a lot of mud. And because humans can't just get along, every city thought it was better than its neighbors. Uruk, Lagash, Kish, all building their temples, writing their clay tablet receipts, and stabbing each other in the back whenever possible. The region was basically the original petty HOA feud, except instead of arguing about lawn decorations, they were arguing about who owned which patch of farmland and whether their god was more legit than yours. Oh, and writing. Can't forget that. Cuneiform started here, and let me tell you, it was not designed for bedtime reading. It began as accounting, lists of sheep, grain, and who owed what. Humanity's first writing system was basically a series of passive-aggressive grocery lists. Later, of course, they expanded it into law codes and myths, but the roots are wonderfully mundane. Imagine inventing writing and the first thing you jot down is 3 sheep missing. Check with neighbor. Truly inspiring. Now, you'd think all this innovation, cities, writing, kings, irrigation, would guarantee stability. Spoiler. It didn't. Because here's the problem with being first at civilization. You're also first at messing it up. By 2000 BCE, Sumer was basically cooked. Salinization ruined the farmland. Too much irrigation meant the soil got salty, crops failed, and suddenly everyone was cranky and starving. Meanwhile, the Akkadians were like, "Cool story, bro, we'll take it from here." Enter Sargon of Akkad. He called himself the first true emperor, and he kind of was. His whole deal was conquering every city he could find and sticking his face on it. Very on brand for kings. Sargon supposedly started as a humble cupbearer before grabbing power. Classic entrance to CEO pipeline. But his empire, like most ambitious startups, grew too fast and collapsed just as quickly. His descendants couldn't keep up with rebellions, climate issues, and the small detail of people not wanting to be ruled by distant overlords. Shocking. The pattern repeats a lot in Mesopotamia. You get a shiny new power. Akkadians, Babylonians, Assyrians, each one builds some intimidating palaces, claims their god loves them best, and then faceplants within a few centuries. Hammurabi of Babylon is one of the big names. You know him from his eye for an eye law code, which sounds harsh, but was actually less about justice and more about the king saying, "Look, here are the rules. Please stop stabbing each other without permission." Of course, Hammurabi died, his empire weakened, and boom, new power takes over. Then the Assyrians show up. These guys are remembered as the original terrifying neighbors. They built Nineveh, deported whole populations, and carved a lot of stone panels showing how awesome they were at impaling people. Basically, if you think your HOA president is overbearing, imagine living under an Assyrian king. They had a whole brand of ruling through fear. And sure, it worked for a while, but running an empire on intimidation has a limited shelf life. Eventually, people get tired of being threatened with mass deportation and just revolt, which is what happened. By around 600 BCE, the Neo-Babylonians had their turn in the spotlight. Nebuchadnezzar II, you've probably heard the name, built the famous Hanging Gardens, maybe. Scholars still debate if they actually existed or if it was just ancient propaganda. Honestly, it wouldn't be the first time a ruler claimed to have built something amazing while actually just redecorating the palace courtyard. Either way, Nebuchadnezzar also conquered Jerusalem, dragged people into exile, and generally made sure Babylon was that place everyone else resents. Again, very on brand for Mesopotamia. And here's the kicker. For all their achievements, writing, law codes, ziggurats, astronomy, Mesopotamian civilizations just kept collapsing. Soil degradation, water mismanagement, endless wars, political chaos. The land that birthed cities was also cursed with the constant need to rebuild them. By the time the Persians rolled in under Cyrus the Great, Mesopotamia wasn't so much the cradle of civilization as that exhausted nursery where the baby won't stop crying. Which honestly feels very relatable. Now let's float gently westward to a place with less mud and more pyramids. Egypt. Because if Mesopotamia was the overachieving student who burned out, Egypt was the classmate who coasted on good geography and the steady river schedule.